The Lover's Cove got its name in 1899. Why it's called Lover's Cove? By the way, the spelling of Lover's Cove is wrong. It's spelled, they do the way they have it now, which is a fish preserve, a game preserve, is Lover apostrophe S, which means one lover. You can't have one lover. You could, the guy would be pretty narcissistic, but you can't have one person a lover. So it should either be Lovers or Lovers apostrophe, right?
Yeah.
Well, so it's wrong to begin with. So that you're going to find I'm very nitpicky. So when things are wrong, I try to correct them. So I keep telling you got to change. It just doesn't make sense. You can't have one person. Okay, why is it called Lover's Cove? The road wasn't put in until 1906, and I'll explain how that got put in. So for people who wanted to make out, like Lover's Lane, they would row over to Lover's Cove, and nobody could see them in town. You would have to get in a rowboat to go over there to see who's there. So basically it was isolated, at least visually isolated from town, and there was no road, so if you wanted to go and spoon and coo and whatever else they used to do in those days, they could do it. So that's how it got the name Lover's Cove. So you know where the city park is. It's also called Machine Gun Park, because the machine gun was put there. It's a World War I machine gun put there after World War I in 1925. But anyway, so it was originally an amphitheater. You probably had noticed all those seats, rows and rows of seats going up the hill. That's where an amphitheater used to be. In 1904, they used to have concerts there. And so where the turnaround for the parking lot is, that is where the stage was. And they used to put on concerts every night, which they did that until the 1920s, which was really, I understand, great. People said they should bring it back again, but believe it or not, some of the neighbors up in the hillside complain about the noise down there, and I think that's a travesty, because it would be so great to sit there and get concerts even now, or at least on occasion. Well, originally where the Metropole Marketplace is now, going from Metropole to Whitley, that whole front area, that is where the original Metropole Hotel was. The original Metropole Hotel, you've probably seen pictures of it. It was a giant building. It burned down in the 1915 fire, which I'll probably talk about in 2 weeks, about the fire that destroyed half the town of Avalon in 1915. It was 3 stories tall. It was built in 1888 by George Chateau, who had just taken over the island in 1887 for $150,000. Why he did is because in 1886, and my grandfather worked for the railroad, so I know the story, it was the first time that the Santa Fe Railroad connected Chicago with the sleepy little Mexican village we call Los Angeles. So George Chateau in Michigan realized that people were now going to want to come to Catalina once they got as far as Los Angeles, because of our world famous fishing and our so-called therapeutic saltwater pools we had here. People in the Midwest especially thought salt water was therapeutic, and I'm sure it is to some extent, but probably not as therapeutic, depending on what's wrong with you. So anyway, in front of the Metropole Hotel was where the glass bottom boats were. They were rowboats. You've probably seen pictures of them. The glass bottom rowboat was invented in 1895 here on Catalina. The reason for them originally had nothing to do with tourists. It was because the fishermen would have a kind of enclosed container with glass on the bottom that they would put over the side to see where the fish were. so they could fish.
The original fish finder.
Yeah, right, yeah. And so it made perfect sense. But then people started thinking, well, this is pretty neat. I mean, to be able to look into the water, you know. So they decided, let's put glass on the bottom of boats, and so that's how the problem is they were rowboats. Now, the best fish you can find anywhere on the island, the best snorkeling beach, is Lover's Cove, and I'll explain why. This is the one place where the southernmost northern fish and the northernmost southern fish converge at this point, which is what makes the reason for Catalina being such a special place. So you get fish there that are never traditionally together. You get them right at that point. So, but the problem is, it would be too hard to row in those days all the way from where the Metropole Marketplace is to Lover's Cove. So they would go off to where Casino Point is now. This was long before the casino. They used to have the two sugar loaves there. I'll explain those two later on, some other lecture. Well, something very nicely happened. The Mon Ami, which was the first motorized glass bottom boat, was built in 1902. It was a side wheeler, very small, probably about the size of this table, if not a little. So now they could make it over to Lover's Cove. Well, that's fine, but how do they get people over there? I mean, they want, and how are they going to get them back? I mean, so where the park is now, they had a vernacular, an inclined railway that they called Angel's Flight, because they had an Angel's Flight in Los Angeles at the same time. It went up from the park up to, they called it Buena Vista Point, which is now Mount Ada. So if you've ever been up there, you've seen the cross, and you see that platform. That is where the machinery it was counterbalanced. These two cars are counterbalanced. One would be coming up from Lover's Cove, and then the other one would come down to the park, and then vice versa. So this is how they got people down there. Well, it wasn't enough. So they decided, we are going to build a road out there. Now, the man who owned, they call it Lookout Cot or Holly Hill House, the one with the pointed roof, that was owned by a man by the name of Peter Gannot. He had built the home in 1890. It's the third oldest home in Avalon. So the Bannings, who had the island before the Wrigleys, went to Mr. Gannot and said, we would like to build a road. Now, in those days, the hillside came all the way down to the ocean. So where you see the walkway, where you see the volleyball courts, the basketball courts, it was all land coming all the way down to the water, all owned by Peter Gannot. So they went to him and they said, we would like to purchase your land because we'd like to build a road to Lover's Cove and then onto Pebbly Beach. He refused to do it. Well, they did a little bit of research. They found that the land owned by Mr. Wrigley, or excuse me, Mr. George Chateau, by Peter Gannot.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Mr. Gannot.
I made too many names in my head. By Peter Gannot, only went down about 20 or 30 feet under his home. Just like the land we own doesn't go all the way to China. I mean, it only goes so far down. Well, his only went 20 or 30 feet. Below that was owned by the Banning brothers, because it was owned by the island, and they own the island. So they went to Mr. Gannot and said, what we would like to do is we'd like to build a road, but we would like to get your permission, and we'd like to pay you to be able to use it. Even though it's ours, it's still under your house. Well, he refused to do it. So they said, okay, sir, what we're going to do is we're going to build a tunnel going through the land underneath your house. Okay. Well, Peter Gano felt that they were bluffing. So the cave that you see when you're out at the Cabrillo Mole, they shot off some dynamite just to show Peter Gano that they weren't kidding. The funny part is when you look at where it is, it had nothing to do with the tunnel. But what it did do is shook the home of Peter Gano. And he said, stop the dynamite, I'll let you have the land. You just stop doing it. So that's the reason for the cave. And that's how the glass bottom boats started going to Lovers Cove now, because they had a path out there. The lovers don't go there anymore because they'll get caught. But so that's basically it. So any questions? So as I said, each